Hey, Cloudcast listeners, before we get started, I want to introduce today's show sponsor, Liquid Technology. Is your company planning on migrating to the cloud, upgrading infrastructure, or relocating your IT hardware? Liquid Technology's Cloud Last is a suite of services that helps organizations move into the cloud. The Cloud Last team will de-rack, pack, and purchase your excess technology hardware. So why not increase your budget by getting money back for your excess IT equipment? In addition, Liquid Technology will ensure that your company's data is safe. They provide on- or off-site auditable data destruction services. So whether your operations are in Ashburn or Amsterdam or somewhere in between, Liquid Technology has expert knowledge in local regulations to deliver a compliant international solution to your company. Liquid Technology is an EPA-recognized dual-certified green recycler. So visit cloudlast.co/cloudcast today, sign up for the service, and you win a CloudLast t-shirt. And one lucky winner will receive a $100 Amazon gift card. That's cloudlast.co/cloudcast. And now, on to the show.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope you're all having a good 2019. I know it's cold in a lot of places around the world, especially here in the United States, but hope you're all enduring. Hope you're all doing well and off to a good start. You know, before we get into our guests today and we continue a little more of our look ahead at some of the big topics that we know is always interested to you, we want to make sure that we cover some cloud news of the week. And so we're going to jump right into that. It's kind of an interesting set of news for early in the year, quite a bit of news actually. So let's jump right into that. So first thing on our list is Veeam, one of the backup software companies who's been around for quite a while, enterprise backup company. Veeam took $500 million in VC funding this week. Veeam's been around for quite a while. It does very well in the backup space, has always done very well in the virtualization backup space. Took another round of VC funding for $500 million. So a very big start to the VC year. Some people were concerned that maybe VC funding was going to be down in 2019. Nope, not yet. Not to be outdone, Rubrik, who also does backup, backup around secondary data, backup data, very involved with the HCI type of technologies, and actually Aaron's company. They took $300 million in VC funding. So, big week for companies that are in the backup space. Sort of interesting to look at how much that space has grown. You go back to about 2008 or 2009, Data Domain was acquired for a little over $2 billion. And between those two companies, Veeam and Rubrik, we're seeing, valuations combined over near $5 billion. And that's not the entire market. So big growth in that space. Obviously, lots of data getting created. So congratulations to both of those companies, and off to a big start for VC funding in 2019. Now, for some non-VC news, AWS acquired a company called Cloud Endure. Cloud Endure is a Israeli company who had mostly focused on sort of backup to the cloud and data management to the cloud, some disaster recovery to the cloud. They were also kind of the core of the Google Cloud Platform's cloud migration service, and AWS swooped in and acquired them. I believe they were also doing some work with AWS as well, but this is considered to be somewhat of a coup in getting that technology away from GCP, and obviously AWS is trying as much as possible to get as many bits of your application and your data up into their public cloud. So, take a look at that. It was kind of a very low-key announcement. AWS tends to make very, very low-key. Amazon and AWS both tend to make fairly low-key announcements. So we'll put that one in the show notes. There was some rumors floating around of a new AWS service that may get announced or may kind of emerge in 2019, sort of called AWS for Everyone, considered to be a project working on low code. So essentially very much an application development space that's very much kind of visual, drop and drag, developing for people that aren't hardcore developers. So, building applications without having to write code. So be interesting to see if that evolves. And there's been some things that have been, kind of emerging, not so much leaked, but kind of emerging about maybe that's going to be an offering that will be coming from AWS in 2019. So we'll put that in the show notes as well. And the last one, which is sort of interesting, and I know we talked about this on our year-end wrap-up show, and I think this is going to be a trend that we'll see more and more. We saw Walgreens, the massive pharmacy company, not pharmaceutical, but pharmacy company, the company that's basically on every corner, at least in the United States, and is growing around the world. They recently announced a couple of partnerships with both Google as well as Microsoft to really start looking at how do they become more technical, more analytical about delivering healthcare, about delivering details about your usage of pharmaceuticals, your health and other things like that. So I think we're going to see more and more companies that are going to begin to kind of get outside of their silo, work with various technology partners, and really realize that the advent and usage of big data and analytics and ML and AI and so forth will become a bigger part of how they serve their customer base. So the AI and ML piece will obviously be very interesting to anybody who listens to our upcoming conversations. But that's kind of the news for the week. Some VC news, some partnership news, some acquisition news. So some interesting stuff that's out there. So this week's Cloud News of the Week is brought to you by our sponsor, Datadog. Datadog is a monitoring platform from cloud scale infrastructure and applications. All of you that have been listening for the last month or so should know Datadog at this point. Datadog provides dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform so you can get end-to-end visibility very, very quickly. It integrates seamlessly with AWS, so you can start monitoring and visualizing your EC2, RDS, ECS, and all your other AWS applications immediately. So if you'd like to try out Datadog for yourself, go ahead and try out a free 14-day trial today. Listeners of the Cloudcast can go to datadog.com/cloudcast. And you'll get not only a free 14-day trial, but a great-looking, very, very soft, great-to-wear Datadog t-shirt. So datadog.com/thecloudcast. Sign up for your free 14-day trial. Start monitoring some of your AWS applications and get a free Cloudcast t-shirt or Datadog t-shirt. And let them know your friends at Cloudcast sent you. So with that, we're going to get to our interview today. We're really going to take a look at what's going on in the AI and ML world for 2019. All right, and we're back. And as we've been doing throughout the year, we've been really starting off the year looking at a bunch of domains that we think are really important to a lot of our listeners, and obviously they're areas that are of a lot of interest to the industry. And so this week, we're really going to try and focus on machine learning and AI. And with that, we want to bring back an old friend of the show and somebody who is really a domain expert in this space and somebody who spends a lot of time in it. So very happy to have Sam Charrington back with us. Sam is the co-host and creator of the This Week in Machine Learning and AI podcast and does a lot of work around research and consulting in this space. So Sam, welcome back to the show. Great to have you on.
Brian, thanks so much to have me back on the show. I'm really excited to participate once again.
We see you from time to time at events, and so we forget that it's been a while since you've been on the show. It's been just a little over a year. So for anybody who may not have heard you back on, I think it was show 321, which was right around the end of 2017, or somebody who may not be familiar with your podcast, which is winning awards and really doing very, very well. So give folks a little bit of background about yourself, and then what you're kind of focused on in the AI and ML space.
Absolutely. Well, if I could start with a plug, I'd say folks should go check out the podcast if they're interested in this space. It's at TWIMLAI.com. And of course, it can be found any place you would like to listen to a podcast. But I really come at the space from the perspective of an industry analyst, focused on the way that enterprises are adopting machine learning and AI. But I'm also really very curious about the math and the science of it, and passionate about the way it's being applied in general. I think artificial intelligence will just have huge impacts on society. And I think the more people that are exposed to it, the more it will reflect our values as a society. So that's kind of what keeps me going. And in this space, I've been doing the podcast for about 2.5 years. We're at about show 220 something. And it's been a crazy ride. There's so much happening in this space.
Yeah, no, yours is the one of the shows that we really love. And I think for those of us, Aaron and I in particular, who don't necessarily have a lot of deep domain expertise in this, it's a fun show because on any given week, you may be talking about, you go in depth with the technology, but it's not just technology. It's how is this impacting society? How is this technology going on behind the scenes from a business perspective that, things that you may not know, but they're improving the business. So it's a really nice mix of, the technology, how it impacts the business, the people that are involved with it, and and kind of how it may impact society in different ways. So that part of the show we really, really love. And because it's such a broad domain, you do a great job covering that.
Yeah, what's been particularly fun for me over the past year is, you and I and Aaron, we all go way back from the cloud computing community. I was very early on in the space prior to being an industry analyst. And as I got deeper and deeper into ML and AI, I spent less and less time focusing on cloud, but now they're starting to come back together. And so I get to see and talk to all my old buds once again. And it's been that part has been particularly great to see.
Yeah. So let's start with some kind of mainstream AI and ML stuff. I think a lot of us, we talked, I think when we talked about a year ago, we said, you sort of know when certain aspects of this technology is becoming really, solidified and strong because you kind of forget about it, right? And so, we know it's part of our day-to-day lives. It's involved with things like fraud detection for your credit card. It's involved with, facial recognition, completing sentences in Gmail. There's a bunch of things, but what, from an AI and ML perspective, as you talk to the community or the domain, like what's sort of considered mainstream and maybe even commodity at this point in time?
The thing that jumps out at me most immediately comes from having just recently returned from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And one of the themes that I saw recurring all over the place is just the extent to which these consumer devices are adopting a few specific technologies. The first is some of the things that we're seeing around computer vision. So object detection in general is one of those things. There were, maybe 50 different companies doing kind of home security cameras that can all, detect motion and do facial recognition, determine who's coming into the house, that kind of thing. But also there is a set of technologies called pose estimation or pose detection that has really advanced over the past year or so. And it's being built into a lot of different technologies, particularly in the autonomous vehicle domain. I saw one application, I think this was a Qualcomm demo, where they were showing how, in addition to being able to identify the pedestrians kind of alongside a vehicle or on the side of the road, they're using this pose detection to determine the orientation of the pedestrian's body and the orientations of their face and try to predict what they're likely to do. Are they likely to step into the street or not? Similarly, that same kind of technology was being used in a product for gyms called Bot Boxer. It's a boxing, kind of a boxing robot. And basically it looked at the orientation of your torso and your face to determine where you're likely to punch. And this thing would basically try to be a good sparring partner by trying to avoid your punches. It's being used inside vehicles to try to detect driver alertness by looking at the orientation of the face. So a lot of really interesting applications of computer vision generally, but this, combination of object detection and orientation detection or pose estimation has been really, really jumped out at me from that show. And the other one is the prevalence of both speech detection and speech synthesis and the whole intelligent assistant, both from, the big cloud vendors like Amazon and Google, of course, but also folks kind of rolling their own and trying to build, products and services around it. Ton of work there. Natural language processing is another thing that jumps out. The example you gave of that was the auto completing your, texts and emails in Gmail, but there's a ton of maturity that's happening around natural language processing, our ability to kind of train computers to understand text and to generate text. Yeah, I could go on. There's just a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah. No, and I think the things that jump out at me as you're explaining that is, I think for a lot of us, we think of machine learning and AI, maybe you listen to a Google keynote or something, and it's always kind of, in a lot of cases, it gets framed in this context of, massive amounts of data, tons of machines churning on stuff with GPUs, and those examples that you talk about where, it's a recognition from a moving vehicle, a recognition from a human with a camera or a device. Those are things that have to, the response has to be really, really fast. It has to be immediate. It feels like, and maybe this isn't right, but it seems like the technology is sort of pushing a certain amount of intelligence out to the edge device. It doesn't all happen in the cloud anymore. Like how is that trend kind of evolving in terms of like massive data sets in a centralized cloud to enough stuff with the right sort of hardware or horsepower to do things at the edge? How's that evolved?
Yeah, I think we're at a really exciting time for that whole evolution. Another interesting experience from CES was my first ride in an autonomous vehicle. And this particular one is done by a company, Aptiv, that partnered with Lyft. And you basically call a Lyft and it asks you if you want an autonomous car. And they've got a representative from the company in the car kind of telling you about the technology. And one of the comments she made was, there's basically a data center in the trunk of this car. And so there is still, for many of these applications, a lot of heavy compute. But one of the things that doesn't really get talked about as much with regards to compute and AI is that there's really two different types of workloads that have very distinct requirements. One is the one we think about when we think of kind of huge data centers and GPUs cranking along on solving some machine learning problem is the training workload. And that happens typically in a batch mode before you actually want to do something. It's not synchronous. But the other piece is the inference workload. That's when you have a model and you want to use that model. You want to make some kind of prediction or query against that model. And that the compute profile is very different there. What is important there is, response time. It's still computationally expensive, but you're not cranking on a big batch of stuff. Typically, you've got a transaction or some number of transactions, and you want to batch them as much as possible, but you can't batch them so long that you're waiting around for, more transactions to come in before you actually do your inference. And so that's really pushing a lot of what's happening around the edge, this idea of inference at the edge, allowing edge devices to take advantage of models to make predictions so that things out in the field can act on them. And of course, autonomous vehicles is one use case, but there's a whole other set of IoT related use cases that is driving this activity.
Right. Now, obviously, those are getting fairly sophisticated because as end users, they're working fairly well. We don't really have to do anything to make them work. What's the flip side of this domain right now? What's the sort of kind of bleeding edge or research centric? Maybe it's only being done at the big web scale companies. What are some of those things that we may hear some buzzwords to pay attention to in 2019? The next thing a Facebook or Google or somebody else is kind of working on somewhere to, I don't know, unlock some new mystery of the universe.
There are a bunch of things kind of on the cutting edge. A few come to mind. One relates to the previous point we were discussing, which is this idea of AI at the edge. There's a lot of interesting work around federated machine learning. This is the idea that, we've got all these sensors in vehicles, in plants, and we're also pushing a lot of intelligence out to these same vehicles and plants. And we want to be able to do learning in a distributed way, not just inference. And the reason why that's important is because you can't push all the data that's being collected at a vehicle, for example, up to the cloud to kind of train the centralized model. There's just too much data.
Right.
So you want to be able to do some learning locally and share some aspects of that learning centrally so that it can inform the development of the models that are running on other vehicles. It also ties into personalization for the particular user or the particular environment. So this idea of federated machine learning, it's one that, because of the progress that we're making OT and edge, the problems have become really clear, or are starting to become clear. The answers aren't necessarily there, but there's a lot of work happening on the part of a lot of different types of organizations to try to figure this out. Certainly cloud is a big part of this. The whole notion of 5G, which is just around the corner, changes the game a little bit as well. So I'd expect to see a lot of innovation over the next year or two around federated machine learning.
Okay. And does this also include? I know we did a show 6-8 months ago or so with Simon Crosby and Simon Aspinall from that were at a company called TWIML AI that was working on this concept called digital twins, which is sort of a way of taking edge data and doing some replication with it. Does that play into that same space, or is that really totally different?
I think they're certainly related. So the digital twin is a term that was coined by GE some time ago. A typical GE aircraft engine has a couple of thousand different sensors in it, things like humidity and vibration and sound and things like that. And the idea with digital twin is they've got all of these engines out deployed in the field, and they want to be able to predict, when these engines might have problems and things like that. And the model that they started developing was one where they basically create a fully electronic or fully digital kind of in software replica of an engine, a particular engine and its operating characteristics, and use that to, I think it's related in the sense that there's, it's based on, devices and sensors and intelligence in the field. And I think what the opportunity is to more directly kind of tie these digital twins to what's happening on a given device right now. Like I think in the typical GE case, they're taking hard drives off of a plane, shipping it to someplace, loading up and updating the twin, running simulations against it. It's a very offline activity. But I think, through this federation idea that we've been talking about, I think all of that will start to come together.
I gotcha. That makes sense. For this is going to be sort of an odd question for folks that don't necessarily listen to your show, but I know as I kind of go through and I'll listen to different episodes at different times, it felt like maybe a couple of years ago there was maybe more of a focus. Some percentage of the shows had kind of a social impact focus. Maybe it was just because it was 17 and people were kind of getting wrapped up in some of the Facebook stuff. It felt like this last year, more of the shows were diving more into the technology. Like we said in the opening, there's always this balance between, what is AI and ML doing to kind of improve the computing experience of whatever that is. And then there's always, some aspect of a concern, for things like privacy and other stuff that, gets collected because of it, it's now involved with the day-to-day stuff. Are you finding that just at this moment in time, there's a different balance of what people are wanting to focus on, or is it always just going to be a balance and it just, was coincidental maybe that you hit on a few more technology things because there was a lot of technology to talk about?
That may be more coincidental. I don't necessarily, when I think back, that doesn't strike. In fact, we just saw on policy implications just a week ago or so, and we've got a big series coming up on AI for good in a couple of weeks. Well, I'm not sure when this will be aired, but that'll be upcoming. So I don't know that necessarily changes. We try to keep a balance between really deep kind of conversations with researchers about kind of cutting edge research and what they're doing, as well as practitioners, folks that are in the field trying to deploy and use this, as well as folks that are kind of thinking broadly about its implications. That's all important to us and our listeners. One of the things kind of going back to my cloud and AI are starting to converge that's been really exciting for me is a project that we launched in November talking about AI platforms and the way organizations and enterprises are building out infrastructure to support the development of AI models at scale. So we did a series of shows that looked at the platforms that were built by companies like Facebook and Airbnb and LinkedIn to support their data science and machine learning efforts. That series also included an interview with someone at Shell responsible for their platform, and a woman at Comcast who built a recommendation system using server lists. And we'll be doing another. That was a wildly popular series among our listeners. We'll be doing another, like a part 2 of that series early this year. And I think it reflects what I'm seeing more broadly within the enterprise, and that is enterprises are coming off of this couple of years where they've kind of been kicking the tires, doing proofs of concepts, getting their hands dirty and feet wet with machine learning and AI. And now there is, from the C-suite to the line of business all the way down, there's this demand to build models into more and more things because they've got a taste of the benefits that come along with it. And accordingly, the data science organization or the machine learning center of excellence or the machine learning engineering team, depends on the enterprise what it's called, they're under tremendous pressure to increase their throughput, their ability to get models out in the field. And the answer to that is to scale up their technology platforms and processes to be able to do this better. So we've been focusing a lot on AI platforms and we've got a couple of an ebook out on Kubernetes and the role of Kubernetes in supporting machine learning training and inference, kind of at the bottom level of that stack. We've got another one that's coming out in February that's focused on looking at kind of from the top down the machine learning and data science process. So data management, experiment management, and model management, and case studies like Facebook, Airbnb, LinkedIn, and what can enterprises learn from the way these companies have built out their AI platforms that will help them achieve scale.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and we will put some links in the show notes because not only the podcast stuff that you do, which is very visible in public, but the ebooks that you've been writing and the other series are really good. So we'll get those in the show notes, and folks should definitely take a look at them, especially if you're interested in this space, you want to dive down deeper into it, and you really want to get some sort of some good meat around the realities of what this is. It seems weird to ask this question in 2019, but I still run into organizations where, maybe it's, maybe more coming out of the IT organization, the line of business might already be doing this, but we still get a lot of kind of newbie questions around big data. Let's say you bump into an executive VP of something, C-level person, and they go, "Hey, give me some basics. What's this gonna cost me to start being able to do some things that impact my business? How am I going to be able to hire? How long is it typically going to take? I mean, given the state of technology today and kind of the availability of data scientists or, online tools that just sort of help, like what might something look like if somebody said, "Hey, we want to be able to improve our customer acquisition ratio or something by 10%. Like, how do you even put numbers around that for somebody? Or is that something that you could talk through?
Yeah, I think like is often the case in technology, the real answer there is kind of it depends.
Sure.
But what it depends on, and this is a key that a lot of people miss, is the way you define your problem. Any of these problems you can formulate in any number of different ways, and the way you formulate the problem has a huge impact on the way you might approach it from a machine learning perspective, and thus the cost and complexity and expertise required of the effort. And so my advice to folks is always a couple of things. Pay a lot of attention to the way you formulate these problems. For example, if the challenge that you want to go after is, driving revenue with machine learning and AI, right? There's a bunch of ways you could look at that. You could use machine learning models to try to predict, demand or customers that are most likely to kind of attach to your offers. You could try to predict churn and stop customers from leaving. You could try to reduce fraud. You could try to predict kind of you could try to apply ML to pricing. There's lots of different ways to do it. So the first piece of advice is kind of think hard about, the specific problem that you want to try to tackle. And this is, there's kind of both science and art to doing this. That itself is a big part of the challenge. And then the next, piece of advice, once you've identified that problem that you want to go after, start as simple as humanly possible, and then build up the complexity from there. Like, it's real easy to kind of fall victim to shiny object syndrome, if you will, and try to, use a deep neural net to solve everything, right? Because those are cool. Right. Or a generative adversarial network, right? But right. A lot of these things, if you think about the results you're trying to achieve and the particularly when you're comparing it to what you're able to do today, the simple models like, linear regressions and decision trees, have the advantages of being relatively easy to understand, relatively easy to train from this perspective that they don't require a lot of data. You can do many of these things in Excel if you want. And they can get you a lot of the way there. So start there and see how far they get you. You'll learn a lot along the way, and that'll better position you to do more complicated things when you need to.
Yeah. And are you finding, where we are today, are people still trying to build things from scratch, or is there just such a wide range of kind of available tools or even data sets that people can kind of get started with things that are available as, cloud services or, readily available technology? There's no need to kind of start from scratch, especially if you're, like you said, you're starting smaller.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a question of like, what does from scratch mean for a particular organization, right? No one's going to build a computer or write the OS, right? You're starting from somewhere. The question is, how much are you, where you're starting from, right? So the cloud vendors, they have what I like to think of as 3-tiered offerings generally. They've got AI-enabled infrastructure. Typically, these are infrastructure as a service offerings that have some GPU capability, for example, that makes them good for training deep neural networks. At the tier above that, they've got data science as a service or machine learning as a service. These are offerings like SageMaker that are often the user interface is like a Jupyter notebook. This is kind of think of it as like a Python IDE for machine learning. It's very popular, but they take away from having to think at all about infrastructure. You're just typing your code into this box and hitting run, right? Yep. And then at a level higher than that, there's kind of cognitive services or, AI as a service. And these are things like, object detection services and translation services, transcription services, things like that.
Yep.
And so companies can kind of pick, depending on their problem, which of these you want to start at. And again, the advice is, start with the thing that, gets you close quickly. And, for example, you could start with, if your problem is one of, say you're moving goods around and you've got a conveyor belt and you want to be able to identify the things that are on your conveyor belt. Why not try one of the cognitive services and see if it can do it? There are things like, Google's got AutoML for vision that will allow you to use your own training data. Maybe it'll get you there. If it doesn't get you there, you could always take what you've learned and then go to the level deeper and train your own model or fine tune someone else's model. There's always a place to start, I think, is the kind of the bottom line here. And the trick is kind of finding, what's the place to start that'll get you there the most quickly and then taking advantage of what's already there.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Just the idea of, break down exactly what business problem you're trying to solve. You're not trying to solve them all. And no, I think that's really good advice in terms of, because that gives you the ability to probably get some sort of result fairly quickly. You can determine if it's helpful, if it's something that you want to expand upon. You probably haven't spent a whole lot of money on it. I think that's great advice. Obviously you can't predict the entire year ahead, but you usually, you've been around the industry for a while, long enough. You have a sense of kind of where things are going. What are some of the, top 2 or 3, either technologies or trends that you're really looking forward to, that you expect to happen, or that you're, excited about trying to cover and dig into and learn more about this year?
I'd say there are 3 things. As I mentioned before, the evolution of platform technologies for AI, particularly within the enterprise, and cloud is a big part of this, is I think that we're in a really interesting time where enterprises are very ripe for kind of taking advantage of that kind of technology, because they're under so much pressure to get more models out and to do more with ML and AI. And so that's a space that I'm investing a lot of time in, both from the podcast and from the research and analysis side of things. I've also been really, really intrigued with deep reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is, unlike kind of the usual thing you hear about in machine learning is supervised learning. You've got a bunch of data, training data, and you've got labels or answers, that you're ultimately trying to predict. And you can predict a model that basically learns how to make predictions based on the relationship between the training data and the answers that you've supplied. With reinforcement learning, the idea is more like when you see, video games, training an agent to kind of exist in some environment and learn about the environment and how to maximize its score. So video games are kind of the classic reinforcement learning problem, but it's also been applied to robotics, autonomous vehicles, and it's an area that I have been following pretty closely. And I think it's a really interesting one, because this challenge of getting the label training data is a huge one. It's one that's, it's very difficult to overestimate how much of a challenge this can be. And so RL is very promising in its ability to allow us to train models based on simulation without having labeled training data. But as it's also immature. It's, today the getting it to work is hard, basically.
Yeah.
And the third thing that I think is really interesting is there's a ton of work happening on generative AI. And so this is, if you've seen, I saw a tweet that kind of lined this up, but, over the past couple of years, if you may have seen kind of pictures of, you may have seen pictures of, this picture, this human image of a human, a face, was generated by an AI. Well, if you line up the different successive generations of that technology, we're getting pretty good at doing this, right? The previous, a couple of years ago, generative AI faces were just like, they were horrible. They were really crappy, distorted, looked like some kind of, horror movie. Now, the resolution is getting much higher. The images are getting much more realistic, and we're able to do it quicker. And so we're also seeing kind of advances in generative AI in natural language processing as well. So the ability to generate, stories and text and things like that is getting better. And that's a really interesting space, because, it starts to get at kind of this essence of artificial intelligence, or this essence of existence, like creativity. And can we make a computer that can be creative in some kind of way?
Right. Yeah, no, I've seen some very, very interesting examples of some of that popping up here and there. And, people creating, like the one example I hear all the time is people say at some point, we'll no longer have Tom Cruise movies with Tom Cruise in it, but he's somewhere, they're piecing together all these little bits and pieces of his other movies. They'll be able to take all that and regenerate it as if he was, 25-year-old Tom Cruise doing Mission Impossible 12 or something like that. So, and that may not be a good example of it. But, well, listen, Sam, every time we get a chance to talk to you, we learn a bunch. We sort of realize how little we know about this space, which is why we talk to you. Folks, I cannot recommend enough, not only to go check out a lot of the work that Sam's been doing, the ebooks and the series and stuff, but obviously become a subscriber to his show every week. I always remember it as TWIML. This week in machine learning and AI. It's always in the iTunes top 20 or so it won't be hard for you to find. Sam, any last words in terms of good ways for people to reach out to you, or things maybe places you might be that people could meet up and pick your brain?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to be pretty easy to find. I'm at Sam Charrington on Twitter, also at TWIML AI. TWIMLAI.com is the website. And I love hearing from folks that are working in this space or who listen to the show.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, again, Sam, thanks for being on. For Aaron and I, we always appreciate the chance to talk to you. Folks, as always, thank you for listening this week, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.